Hello, hello, friends. Thank you for tuning into the Odd Thoughts podcast. At the Odd Thoughts podcast, we like to talk about the everyday odd thoughts, have conversations on relatable topics, and just discuss whatever comes to mind. My name is Gunther, and I am your host. Welcome to episode 30. For episode 30, I wanted to start off by talking about maybe the possibility of losing one of the five senses, seeing, hearing, smelling, touch, taste, maybe even losing all five of the senses. Then I transitioned into talking about an article that I had read about these 1100 it was these scrolls that were found from Pompeii from the Mount Vesuvius eruption that recently were kind of deciphered through AI. And I just thought that was kind of amazing, the advancements in computer technology and how we're able to detect like old artifacts and old scrolls. I think it's pretty amazing. Then I wanted to talk about some possible habitable exoplanets. The universe is so large that there are tons of other planets out there and some of them kind of Earth-like. So I thought it'd be fun to kind of discuss about some possible habitable exoplanets. Then I wanted to end it on talking a little bit about embarrassment. I think everybody feels a little unease about themselves and some awkwardness and sometimes some shame about our aspects of our life. And I just wanted to dive a little bit into that. So if you want to listen to any of these topics, I appreciate you stopping by. Thank you for tuning in. Please enjoy. But how's everybody doing? I hope y'all are doing okay. I hope y'all had a good Thanksgiving, had a bunch of turkey, had fun with your family, whatever you did. I hope that it was the best day ever. You know, life is not always going to be that easy sometimes. For certain aspects of our life, time will only tell what's to happen. You use that time to take action in your life. We only can kind of decide certain things as they come around. You got to find the motivation to want better circumstances. There's these little things that are harsh for us and we don't feel very great about, and that can help us with pulling ourselves out of these circumstances. Through the pain and the suffering, you're doing what you can to form something better. Remember that everything takes effort. Something is better than nothing. These little steps that we take through our day-to-day life, doing what we can, it's only going to lead to something more. When you sit and you wait, you're going to decide your destiny right there. You're just going to let everything pass by and nothing becomes different. Truly, you're only feeding to that dread if you just want to sit there and think that nothing ever happens. Nothing ever happens good to you. It's going to be hard. It's going to be excruciating and for sure be unforgiving at times. Pushing forward in this life is the only way we can make things happen. Making sure you take control and make the effort, no matter how big or small it is. Effort is only turning nothing into something. So we put in effort every single day. We try to do our best to make something better. And whether it's super small or super big, it's only for the better of ourselves. I know y'all are doing everything good. I know it's hard. I, I know it's hard for me, but I'm doing okay. I generally know I am doing okay. I'm very thankful that I had a good Thanksgiving. I got to have most of my family there except for my older sister and my older sister Cara and my nephew Theo. My little nephew was sick, so little poor baby was sick during Thanksgiving, and Mama's got to take care of the baby, so that makes sense. But we got to have my niece and the other kids, and my house was stacked, boy. We had a lot of people at Thanksgiving. It was pretty amazing, truly pretty amazing. And got some good turkey, got to eat some sides. Every year my family also does. We also play some football on our own, right? We call it the Turkey Bowl. You know what I'm saying? This year we didn't have as many people play. Usually it feels like we got like a 6-on-6, like 7-on-7 game going, but I think everybody was just trying to chill on the turkey this year, and we got six people together, so it was 3-on-3, and it was pretty awesome. It was One team was me, my dad, and my cousin Jennifer, and then the other team was my little sister Katie, her boyfriend Robbie, and his sister Alexis. And it was awesome. Alexis has never played football or knows anything about football. She was having fun, dude. It was like the whole point was having fun. It was awesome. And my team won. What's up? I we won it on a flea flicker, which was pretty great. We failed on the first attempt at a flea flicker, and then I was like, run it again. I was like, I'll be open deep. Don't worry, I'll be there. Just throw it, and it worked. We got lucky. It was awesome, and it was perfect. It wasn't rainy outside, and it was a little cool, but it wasn't cold, you know. So perfect turkey bowl conditions. But also we had my cousin Jessica brought over her dogs, Miss Freya and Samson. Samson's a little three-legged dog that I just love that boy. I love Freya too. But we just had everybody was just having a good time, and it felt like everybody was having conversations, and we were all talking to each other, and that's just a beautiful thing about Thanksgiving, and it shouldn't just be Thanksgiving that you do that kind of stuff, but it makes it a lot. It just makes it seem like that's just a perfect time, a perfect conditions and perfect combination of things is at Thanksgiving. Everybody's in town. Everybody, we're sitting down together having this big dinner, and that's just fun, man. I hope everybody else had a really good Thanksgiving too. I really do. I hope everybody got a bunch of turkey and maybe play some football, right? Or play some board games or whatever your family does. Maybe you got to go to a couple Thanksgivings, get a couple plates from your auntie and your grandma and your girl's grandma and whatever else, you know what I'm saying? I think that's pretty awesome. And like I said, I don't think we should wait till Thanksgiving to be thankful for our family and spend time with our family. I know that sometimes I get kind of like I'm not always receptive to that kind of stuff or more so I just don't always reach out to my family. But I'm always thankful for them, right? Every time we get to hang out, it's the best. But yeah, like I said, I had a great Thanksgiving. I hope everybody else had an amazing Thanksgiving. But without further ado, let's hop into episode 30. Hopefully, everyone is blessed with all five senses. Maybe not perfect, but it's truly amazing on what we experience as humans through those senses, through hearing, seeing, feeling, tasting, and smelling. Sorry, I had to think about the last sense. It truly is a blessing to think about all the things we can experience through those senses. But maybe, some don't work as well as others. Over time, inevitably, certain senses will decline. But hopefully, you can keep some pretty strong. I know I quite often think about, my eyesight's kind of going out and my hearing's not always that good. But it gets me kind of thinking even further in the future that maybe one day they'll go out and hopefully I'll be able to keep my other senses. But I was kind of playing with the idea to think about what it would be like maybe to to lose any of the five senses. I know that I'm very appreciative of all five senses. Sometimes things can be pretty strong. I have certain sensory issues with things, so things can be pretty extreme at times. But when I wake up every day, I really truly feel blessed that I have eyesight and that I can smell things and I can touch and just you know what I'm saying. It's just a blessing to be able to do that kind of stuff. I know that I feel like I mostly rely on like my sight as I think a lot of people do. It's like sight and feel. They kind of go together in a way, right? You see something, you touch it, you feel it, right? I think that to I don't know what's most important when it comes to, senses. All of them seem very important, but I just kind of think about I just don't want my eyesight to go, or I don't want to lose the sense of the ability to feel things. I don't know if I mind losing like my hearing necessarily. I'm already kind of daft as it is, so I don't hear great already. I always kind of think it's with like I have some sort of underlying sinus issues from when I was a kid or something. But I don't need to hear everything. quite often I think I would like to maybe tune out things in my life. But also, there's a lot of sounds and a lot of beautiful things, you know. Listening to music is great, and when I'm watching a movie, I like to hear people talk in the movie, hear the kind of cool sounds of nature, and just I love listening to people laugh, and it's great hearing people talk. It just lets you know that things are around you, kind of in a different way. So it would be kind of tragic, no doubt, to lose that sense of hearing, but maybe I think I could kind of let that one go a little bit. Maybe even, I can maybe sacrifice the sense of smell too. Maybe. There's a lot of great smells, but there's I think a lot of bad smells too, and I don't know if necessarily the great smells are always going to be able to outweigh the bad smells, you know what I'm saying? And I mean I think sometimes even good smells can be a little bit too much. So so I guess maybe honestly maybe the smelling over hearing. Like I said, I truly don't want to lose either one. And right now in my current life as I'm getting a little older, it kind of feels like my hearing is the one that goes is going out most. I don't got great eyesight, but I can still see things. Put my glasses on it still helps. It hasn't gotten worse over the time. A little worse than when I was 13 when I first started wearing glasses, but it hasn't gotten really much worse in the last 5 years or a little over that. But I know that when we start thinking about like the sense of like taste, right? I love like good tasting things, right? Food, drinks, those are just beautiful things. Now as there are good, there are bad, right? So there are a lot of bad taste. Feels like that morning breath, that morning mouth when you wake up and little saliva, a little gucked upness. That's not a good taste. I don't want that. Sometimes it things like it feels like this taste gets like made up in your mouth, like your taste buds just like make up something when you like see something or you smell something. It almost is almost like you can kind of taste it as well, which all the senses kind of feel like they all kind of connect in a certain way. That's why when people talk about when they lose a certain sense or they lose certain senses, that other ones will grow and become a little stronger because they're not working together anymore. So they got to be a little more independent. But there's a lot of good taste, 100%. And I mean, it probably, that's a tough thing because I don't, I like food and I'm not like a big fan of food, but I do like to enjoy my food and I do like to have a good taste to it. I know that sometimes when it doesn't taste good, it throws me off. I think sometimes I'm more of a texture person when it comes to eating, but I know that taste is something I love. That's a little harder of a thing to lose, I think. Like I said, when you think of the bad things with these senses, when the bad smells, the bad, taste, you can kind of go without them, but then you think about all the good things, and that becomes pretty hard. But truly, I don't want to lose my eyesight completely. I don't want to go blind, and in touch, I think is like the biggest thing. I want to be able to feel things, not only go out and grab something and put my physical hand on it or have something touch me and I can sense it, but I want to be able to do that. To feel like I'm like numb to everything would be insane. That would be just like, the craziest thing. You know, I just you kind of would have to go with the punches, I guess, when you lose a sense, right? You're kind of sacrificing a lot, especially if you've always had that sense, right? If you're born blind or born deaf or whatever it may be, then you wouldn't know necessarily what that change feels like. You might know that you're missing out on things, but you wouldn't know all of a sudden the things you're missing out on. So it becomes kind of a sacrifice, right? Which ones would I sacrifice, right? And it's not gonna ever be my say. I wish I could think about like, oh, if please, like, if anything goes, if even though that's weird to even hope for, but if any of my senses go, I hope it's not my eyesight. I hope it's not my ability to feel. It's 100% not gonna be my say. That's the kind of the beautiful thing about the human body, right? It's it's just gonna tell you what's gonna happen, and you just kind of have to you got to be along for the ride and just let things happen, let things change. But I always feel that my eyesight or my hearing is gonna go out first. I say it all the time. I joke about it, but I'm also pretty I'm pretty serious about it too. I think I'll go blind or go deaf. One of the two. Maybe at the same time. But I definitely don't even want to think about losing like all my senses at once. That's a total like sensory, deficient, it's like a total blackout. Like everything's just been turned off on you and you just like you can't feel, you can't hear, you can't smell. I don't know how you would even distinguish besides like how do you I don't like I said, I don't know. Like I haven't lost any of my senses, so how do you distinguish if you know you're like alive or not? Dude, I guess you would have thoughts and certain things that can maybe that still your body functions in a certain way. And I mean, I think death would be pretty definitive. You would know if you're dead, but if you're totally deprived of all five senses, I don't think you're gonna know anything. You're not gonna know what's going on your day to day thing, your day to day life. That's crazy. I don't even want to think about losing one or let alone two at the same time. So to think about three, four, five, a bunch of them going out is intense. That's that's somewhere I hope I'm never at. And hopefully, hopefully everybody stays blessed with all five senses. Truly, I think that's just kind of one of those things. As humans, we go through a lot of this kind of suffering and pain, and things pop up, and it's no say on what's going to happen and how we're going to handle it. So you just kind of got to roll with the punches when it happens. Maybe that, like I said, maybe like you gain an extra strength in the other senses, right? Where maybe you start to hear a little better because your eyesight's not good, or you start to smell a little better even though your taste is out or whatever. That's a cool thing. Become kind of a superhuman aspect, a little superpowers to your senses. Maybe you gain the sixth sense, like in the movie. Maybe you start to see the other world, the dead, start to see dead people. Nah, I don't want that sense. I think I'm good on that. I'll lose all my five senses and I don't have to gain a sixth one. That's cool. I don't need to see dead people. Dude, that movie was so awesome, and I love the title of it, The Sixth Sense. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of that, some people claim to be a little more empathic towards spirits, or maybe you gain like a spidey sense. Even though like you can't see anything, maybe there's this tingle that your body feels. Maybe that's really what the sixth sense is. It's not like what the movie says, where it's seeing dead people, but maybe Spider-Man had it right where you just kind of have a supernatural or superhuman instinct, this ethereal thing that just lets you know when things are happening. That's kind of interesting to think about. We've heard about not necessarily people developing superpowers, but we've heard about people getting a little more extra ability in certain things, especially when they lose a sense, feels like it's always like a cliche when blind people are a little better at hearing, but maybe that's something to it. They got a little bit better of a sniffer, you know what I'm saying? But I don't want to lose any of my senses, and I hope that everybody in the world, hopefully we all stick with the five senses. And even at times when there's a little bit of like a sensory overload, which I quite often feel, I know at the end of the day I'm very blessed to have my ability to see and hear and smell and taste and feel. So, I thank God every day that I have all five of my senses. Through the expansive history of our Earth, we have been able to uncover a lot of the ancient world that came before us. We get to see like previously buried cities and previously buried people sometimes, and artifacts and just tons of other hidden items. It feels like we slowly connect ourselves to that ancient world. The further we kind of explore and the more we see, it's kind of closing that timeline a little bit. Not everything stays in perfect condition, obviously, as we discover. A lot of things fall apart or very fragile, but when we get to have these kind of great pieces of artifacts and great pieces of history, we often do cherish it. I was reading an article of it was like maybe a month ago, maybe 3 weeks, 4 weeks ago, and it was an article I was reading on CNN. but it was talking about how with AI technology and kind of computer technology that we're able to decipher things a little more easier than we used to be able to. We've kind of collected a certain database with language and hieroglyphics and whatever else, so that now we kind of put them into these systems, and they help us with identifying things a little easier. But specifically, this article was talking about a scroll that, or see, they have a bunch of these scrolls that are called Herculaneum, yeah, Herculaneum scrolls. They were a series of scrolls that survived the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. And Mount Vesuvius very famously covered Pompeii and the neighboring city, or yeah, city, civilization, if you will, Herculaneum. I hope I'm saying that right. I'm not good with my language sometimes. But it took 2,000 years old. These scrolls were 2,000 years old, rediscovered in the 1700s. You know what I'm saying? And so it kind of makes you think how old these scrolls were before they were even in Pompeii and Herculaneum. You know what I'm saying? But in the early 1700s, when they were on site around Pompeii and stuff like that, they were drilling a well, and apparently this well that was I also okay, this is what I thought was kind of funny. I don't know how true this was, but it was saying that they were drilling this well that would happen to be at the same spot that Julius Caesar's father-in-law's house was. So I don't know how accurate that is, but still cool to think about. But they ended up discovering 1,100 carbonized scrolls, all of them super fragile, covered in just like ash and, buried underground for thousands of years, for a long time. And people kind of thought they looked like just like coal. They were just like debris or whatever. But then as they kind of collected it, they were able to see, oh, these are a little more than just coal. These are just a little more than debris. They were actually like scrolls. But it wasn't until recently that these scrolls have been decoded. Like I said, this the beautifulness of AI a little bit, and it freaks me out a little bit. I'm not gonna lie, but with things like this, it's kind of cool what AI technology can do. But they said that it was they yeah, so they decoded. It was a word. It was the word for purple is the Greek word for purple. Called it's pronounced, I think, porphyrius. I think that's how you pronounce it. But it was a Greek word for purple. They found it on one of these scrolls. And a man by the name of Luke Veriter, he's a computer science student at University of Nebraska, is the one that discovered it. Was the one that first like saw it. And I guess the reason that he was even able to see the scroll is that because there was this thing called, forgot who. I'm kind of confusing myself on. Sorry, I thought I put down the right information, but apparently there was this like challenge that was like released to everybody that was saying that we'll put up a certain scan, like a certain number of scans of these scrolls. And I don't know how they use this. Like they scanned it using like X-ray technology, basically. These scrolls were all like coiled up, so they had like this X-ray scan to see the words and like different markings. And through these like scans, they were able to then flatten them out onto the computer. And so people all around the world, there was this Vesuvius challenge that was like basically sent out saying that anybody who wants to try to decipher these scrolls can. And so this guy, Luke Ferreter, did. He was the first one to decipher it. He won $40,000 for just deciphering that one word. But it was kind of cool. It was the simple fact that we have this unwrapping kind of technology that they can't physically touch these scrolls and unwrap them themselves because they're so fragile. So, just the advancement of computer technology, specifically, I guess it's called computer tomography. I'm just messing up these words. I'm sorry, but it's just X-raying all these different layers, scanning like different markings and seeing a little like change in darkness and seeing if it like is if it's just like a little dust on it or if it's an actual like set it into the paper. But that was kind of cool to think about then just being able to virtually flatten everything, and the AI is comes in and it's trained to identify ink, to identify like dark markings. So after they've scanned it and they let the AI process it, they're able to identify certain markings, which made it easier for people to then analyze it, like this guy Luke. That's kind of cool to be from just a computer science guy, student, not just a guy, but computer science student at the University of Nebraska, just hanging out, thinking like maybe I can do this. Maybe you're just so in that zone with your studies, and I think that's kind of the thing with even a little bit of that excitement. You kind of are just hoping for maybe an opportunity like that as a student like that. But the computer technology that was created for this was created by a science professor named Brent Seals from the University of Kentucky. It took 20 years apparently for development, but it's 20 years well worth it. The simple fact that we can maybe even go back to not only these Herculaneum scrolls, but like other scrolls and other, untapped documents and artifacts that we just haven't been able to get into because of, fragility and just not wanting to hurt anything and change anything. I think that's amazing. But the Vesuvius challenge is apparently still a thing. They're offering up like $700,000 for I think if you can identify a minimum of 140 characters, you get $700,000, which that's pretty nice. But that's cool. I just think with the modern day technology, apparently in like the 19th century, so the 1800s, they tried like opening up maybe a couple of the scrolls and they just crumbled apart. And it was lucky that they only tried a few of them. I don't know how many necessarily, but hundreds of scrolls pulled apart. So I guess they did hundreds of them, which is unfortunate. But maybe they were able to still depict certain things through some of the pieces. But with this technology, it just makes it a whole lot easier. And they said that the article was talking about that they kind of hope that the whole scroll maybe is deciphered by the end of 2024 next year, which is seems kind of plausible with how kind of recent this challenge has kind of got out and how it kind of has now all these eyes on it. You know what I'm saying? As long as people are kind of caring about it, then eventually it should be figured out, at least in my mind. But it just brings I like to reiterate that thing of like it opens up that connection to the ancient world. The more we discover these things and the more that we uncover and the more that we do it just shows us so much on how ancient people lived and what they did, and like I said, opens up the possibility of more deciphering, and we just it's cool to understand people's mindsets and see how people lived and see what people wrote about and see what people's inspirations were. I think sometimes as like people in the modern generation, we might think of people from this old world as maybe less advanced or like quote unquote like less cultured or something like that, but it's just different. We just don't know because we don't have pictures and we don't have video cameras and we don't have these people telling us their experiences, right? So as we find these ancient writings and we find ancient artifacts and buried cities and mummified people, bones and stuff like that, it just opens up this big timeline, factor. It opens it all up and it kind of gives you literally a flashback into how these people were living, and hopefully we just further the understanding, and I think that's just a beautiful thing. And I I literally I think everybody should get involved in history a little bit. I think there are so many cool stories and so many great things that you can kind of see through the small little pieces that we found today. And hopefully, like I said, hopefully this a wider scope of more things to come. Just finding out more stuff. But just pretty amazing on what AI has done for us and the advancements in technology. The beauty of our Earth almost seems unique to just our own world. The existence of life, all that nature has to offer, makes it seem like a truly incredible place. I often think about how lucky I am to exist and how lucky I am to live my human existence here on Earth. But sometimes it's hard not to wonder about places outside of our Earth, other worlds. Even though we think about how perfect certain conditions are here, it's kind of cool to think about maybe there is a possibility that there's a planet out there that's kind of like Earth, that there's life and, you know, nature and but maybe even older than Earth here, the Earth that we have here today. There's been over 30 years that we've kind of started exploring exoplanets. There have been thousands of discoveries. Some of them have been seen as pretty like inhabitable, and some of them just crazy gnarly planets floating out into our universe. And it's amazing to think about these giant telescopes that we've kind of sent into space. They've opened up all these questions and these answers that we kind of have had for so long. And I think it's kind of a weird thing to not think about, that there is 100% a plausible reason to think that there is life on other planets. As we know that kind of a certain amount of perfect conditions have been formed to form Earth. What's to say that there isn't another place out in the vast, ever expanding universe that are exactly like this? I did a little research on thinking about what are some habitable exoplanets. I went on like space.com, planetary.org. I went exoplanets.nasa.gov, and I just did a little researching. I kind of started looking around and started seeing if we've discovered on some theoretical habitable planets. Some things that are kind of some planets that are like Earth that have certain similar conditions that maybe could be inhabitable, or maybe are already inhabited by another life form that isn't us. But for I guess in today, like, I don't know if how accurate this number is, but so far there's been 5,530, yeah, 5,539 total exoplanets discovered, or at least, kind of ID'd in a way. We haven't been able to reach any of these exoplanets, but we've gotten to see what they look like. And when you're looking for exoplanets, I was kind of reading that the for real big thing is you have to identify stars, as they are kind of the easiest things to see. There's like the red dwarf stars, which are kind of the most common. They're a little smaller, but they burn pretty hard. And you got things like yellow dwarfs, which are like the sun, like ours. And then orange dwarves, which I've read that orange dwarves are kind of the more like ideal star if planets were to form around it. But Earth, we surround a yellow dwarf. Our sun is a yellow dwarf star. It's also referred to as a G type star. But the whole thing is that apparently the hotter the star, the more likely the inhabiting ability is for exoplanets that orbit that star. And when you're trying to identify, like, when you're like looking at the stars and you want to think like you want to try to identify exoplanets, they look for like the star light. When they look at like certain shadows will sometimes pass in front of the stars that they see, and if they see these shadows, they'll start to try to identify like mass and maybe shape. And through all these kind of identifiers, they're able to maybe get a general idea of if these planets are, or if they're actual planets or not, or if they're in a certain habitable zone. Each star, if there are planets that orbit that star, there's a certain distance that go from the planets to the star that there's a habitable zone in. And what the habitable zone basically is a planet's orbit to proximity, like to the sun. And you kind of want to also think about it's supposed to offer like the perfect conditions where it's not too hot and gaseous, and it's not too cold and like solid. It's supposed to identify basically the possibility of water. And also you also want to look for kind of the mass, right? So if they look at some of these exoplanets and they see that it's under 10 Earth masses, and as well as it's smaller than 25 Earth like radii, so it's not as big and it's not as like wide as the Earth, or not past it more so. Then they can kind of say that it's pretty close to maybe what Earth can be like. It doesn't say that that's going to be exactly like Earth, but Usually when you find close enough parameters and it has that similar orbit from its star to what Earth is to our sun, then that makes it more plausible. If it's too close, then radiation hits and everything is fried. If it's too far, then it's just hard to ID what even things are. It's some planets they orbit out like too far outside the habitable zone and they just kind of like don't seem like anything in the dark vast void of space. So when you see them a little closer and they flash in front of the starlight, it makes it easier to identify. But it's just when it's it literally has to be, it almost seems like it has to be right place for things to be the right condition. Makes you really truly think that kind of everything on Earth is like perfect, and even though things don't look perfect on foot here on the ground, but from a universal standpoint, everything had to be perfect. It had to be a certain distance away, and the composition also has to be rocky. That's like a big thing, so it offers like a diversity in environment and stuff like that. And also water, which is like a main source for all life. So that's kind of what people look for when they look at just exoplanets in general. They look for certain identifiers like that. And then when you're talking about maybe possible habitable exoplanets, then you have to think about how close they are related to Earth, and not only just on shape and size, but proximity to their suns. We have our certain proximity. You got to look at the other exoplanets' proximity to their stars. But there's that perfect spot in the middle. That seems the most, when it's that kind of middle inhabitable zone where there's a rocky composition and it's not too close and not too far that water liquid actually forms. Then that's what makes kind of a perfect habitable exoplanet. But over the years, it's literally been probably, yeah, about maybe about 40 years, kind of 30 to 40 years that we've done this kind of further exploration into space. We've seen things on Earth, like we've seen it through telescopes, but there's a whole history of eventually sending things into space to capture pictures and stuff. But I thought it'd be fun to kind of NASA has all this history of exploration in space when it comes to like exoplanets, and it was just amazing to kind of read it all. But apparently in 1984, that was kind of the first planetary disk observed. It was a dust cloud that was in front of the star Beta Pictoris, and they just saw like just a little bit of a shadow. It was a circular disc shape, right? They couldn't identify anything else. But 1984, that was kind of the first tellings that maybe other stars have maybe some sort of things that rotate that orbit it. Whether they're planets or not, we don't know yet. And then 6 years after that, in 1990, was when they would officially launch the Hubble Space Telescope, actually sending something into space that's able to at least capture a certain aspect. At first, I think the Hubble it was just to capture like lights. It was more of a like a light receptacle, and as it kind of detects these certain light from these certain stars, then it makes it maybe a little more of a possible thing to do when discovering exoplanets when you see shadows and whatnot. And then a couple years after that, they discovered the first exoplanet officially. It was named. They call it PSR B1 257 plus 12. Great name, honestly. But when they saw the exoplanet, they realized that it was kind of close to the star it was orbiting, and so the radiation was going to be probably pretty insane on that planet. But um, a few years after, it was 9 years after that, in 2001, they finally found kind of theoretically the first habitable zone planet. So, not necessarily identified completely as habitable, but the possibility of habitability through being in that zone. It's called HD 28185b, and apparently it had kind of the same proximity orbit as Earth does to our sun, but it was 6 times Jupiter's size. So, even though it was huge, like it was like in the habitable zone, it was way bigger than Earth. And theoretically, when it's too big, it doesn't have the right conditions. It doesn't have like a rocky composition, or it just is harder to like have the perfect conditions on that planet. Then in 2007, we finally got kind of the first exoplanet map. They sent out a telescope that was able to use spectroscopy to detect like extraterrestrial life, kind of. The Spitzer Space Telescope is what it was called, I think. But what it was able to do is it was able to scan like temperature of clouds or like the clouds that are on some of these exoplanets. They're able to determine temperature on the surface, however that happens. But that makes it a little bit easier to then detect like conditions physically on the planet and whether they're livable or not. But yeah, and then they discovered I guess a couple more like possible like in the habitable zone exoplanets. It was HD 189,733b and then HD 209,458b. Just great names, just literally it's like science fiction, real life science fiction. It's so funny to think about naming some of these things and the star names and just it's pretty fun. Space is pretty cool. You got to really admit that. But in 2009 it feels like to me was kind of like a really big jump in the whole space exploration. The Kepler planet finding mission it was finally, put into play and they released the Kepler telescope. And this was the first one that was kind of more advanced in the way of it was able to more confidently detect dips in starlight. They were able to more confidently suggest that dipping in starlight may suggest planets kind of going in front of that star, which is pretty amazing. And pretty quickly they discovered a bunch of planets, but up to that point from 1990 to 2009, it was 1,000 confirmed exoplanets found, which is amazing. 1,000 that's 30 years. That's 29 years. That's a lot of planets, and just to think about how deep space is and to discover all of those planets in that short amount of time, or at least to me feels like a short amount of time, is pretty amazing. But a couple years after that, in 2011, was the first identified rocky exoplanet. They identified by the Kepler mission. Kepler 10b is what it was called. It was 14 times the size of Earth and 46 times the mass. So quite a dense and big boy. Not gonna lie, but it had a rocky composition, which helps with certain like altitudes and certain dimensions and environment on that planet. But apparently it also was suffering from extreme heat. It was 20 times closer to the star than Mercury is to our sun, so it was right there. And with how big it was, yeah, it just would have been too bad, huh? It would have been pretty hot, I guess. So we can't put a big umbrella over that planet. And then in 2014 was the first Earth-sized planet identified, like pretty closely related to the exact size of Earth. Um, which which then implies that water could possibly exist. They won't be able to know unless they get there, which take a long time. But the planet is Kepler 186f. It's 10%. So not 10 times, but 10% larger than Earth, and possibly also meaning that it can be rocky as well. And the star that it orbits is half the size of the sun, so it's smaller, but it still is has the ability to allow planets to have a certain habitability if it's in that zone. But what is it? Oh, yeah, it's 500, dude, 500 light years away. I was reading that one light year it's like 5.88 trillion miles. So do the math, 500 light years away. Have fun with that. We're never getting there anytime soon. But also in that year, 2014, the Kepler one malfunctioned and it had to come back. So that's kind of unfortunate, but they're ready for the next one. They literally that same year just launched K2 the Kepler 2 K2, right back on the mission, better than ever. And it's just amazing on in the next few years is like what that mission, what the Kepler like space telescope was able to discover is truly amazing. But in 2015, the next year, Kepler 452b is an Earth. It's a planet that was basically described as Earth's bigger, older cousin. It's 1.6 times Earth's size. It has like a similar orbit rate too. It's 385 days for its orbit. The star is a G2 type star, which is exactly like here on Earth. Like our sun. Same orbit proximity, and they called it a super Earth basically. And so this is like kind of this is one that was almost exactly the same, and it's older as well. And that's kind of the thing with some of these older ones is that life could have been around a lot longer, right? A lot longer than what we have so far here on Earth. And then in 2016 was the first kind of like big like single cache of planets. 1,200 exoplanets in one go discovered. And that's amazing. That's unbelievable. All taken in kind of one big mapping. And they identified that 40% of them of those out of those 1,200 could possibly be kind of rocky, which means that life could be more possible and certain environmental things could be more suitable for life and stuff like that, as similar to here on Earth. But they also discovered that our closest star, which is Proxima Centauri, which is our neighbor star, is they had an exoplanet. Proxima b is what they called it, and it's the closest exoplanet that we kind of have. Now it's not habitable, I don't think, but it's the closest exoplanet. And then 2017, they discovered seven Earth-sized planets surrounding this red dwarf star. They called it the TRAPPIST-1. And these planets were all kind of the same size, but only a couple of them sat in that habitable zone. And they're only 40 light years away. TRAPPIST-1 is only 40 light years away, so a little closer than 500 light years away. But not all seven planets are habitable, but a couple of them lie in that zone. And with them being the same kind of size as Earth, that adds that plausibleness of it being inhabitable, just as Earth is. But I have a what did I have? One more? Yeah, I have one more thing that's kind of like a big major event. In 2021, they launched the James Webb Space Telescope. So they sent like official James Webb because I think isn't there like the James Webb telescope here on Earth and then like on the ground and then there's like the space telescope in the sky. Maybe I'm confused on that. But this was like the first like big mission in the way of trying to search for the oldest reaches of the galaxy, basically galaxies, the oldest reaches of the universe, more so. The whole mission behind the James Webb Space Telescope is just to find the oldest reaches of the universe, find galaxies older than the Milky Way, but also picking up on oxygen levels and methane levels and really trying to truly identify the like orbits, like the actually truly identify the same proximity and also orbit time around suns. And this is kind of taking, I think, a big step in trying to really identify inhabitableness on these so-called habitable exoplanets. But yeah, this is just a bit of the history. I would suggest everybody go look up like more of the things, and there was a couple things I kind of skipped over. I just kind of wanted to hit some of the big ones. And just to think about, we're only kind of getting better at it. And I think with people like Elon Musk who want to like inhabit or Mars and stuff like that, there's this interest. There's a hopefully a rise and hopefully a new like space race in a way, right? Where it's maybe we just get interested in that. You don't want to neglect the things on Earth, but it's cool to think about what's out there waiting for us and waiting for people to discover and be a part of. But some of the I talked about some exoplanets that kind of are habitable, right? I mentioned Kepler 186f and Kepler 452b, TRAPPIST 1e, Proxima b. These ones are kind of like ones that I've talked about and that I was just talking about with the history. But I was reading like another list that was talking about a few more that weren't listed on this in the on NASA. I know you can do a little more deep diving, but I kind of got this off an article that was talking about more so the most some other more suitable exoplanets to habit. And think it was kind of cool. There's on Wikipedia and tons of other websites. There's just these long list of habitable zone exoplanets, and some of them seem kind of reasonably, like that could happen. And some of them are like it's too hot, or it's too solid, or it's way too big, or it's the sun's not more powerful enough. But also, like, a lot of these planets are just light years away. It's kind of funny. It's like some of them are 20 light years away, 200, 500, 1200. It's crazy. But also just kind of crazy to think about how deep we can kind of see into space and see into the universe itself. Some of the other ones to see, I did write down a couple other ones that I read off these lists. There was one, it was the Gillespie, I think it's called, Gillespie 667cc. This one was 4.5 times bigger than Earth. Its orbit is 28 days, but it's a little too close apparently. So it's kind of it's got the habitable aspect, but it's just too close in orbit, and the 22 light years away, obviously too pretty far away. Another one that the Kepler space mission found was Kepler 22b, 600 light years away, but it's the first Kepler planet that was kind of found in the habitable zone, but it wasn't necessarily like anything to write home about. It was the first one in that zone, but it was 2.4 times bigger than Earth, 290-day orbit, which is kind of, you know, that's similar to ours. It's not too far off. It's kind of a smaller G type star, so a smaller yellow dwarf star, but it's close. They don't know what the obviously they won't know what the surface looks like because it's 600 light years away. We're not going to get there anytime soon, but it was the first one they kind of thought they looked in that habitable zone. Then I read one, it was the Kepler 69c, which is 2700 light years away. That's crazy. 2700 light years away. This one is 70% larger than Earth. 242-day orbit. The sun is 80% more luminous, so it's a little more hot, which hotter stars apparently mean more likely it's inhabitable, or it's the conditions could be a little more suitable. And then there's also Kepler 62f. That one's 1200 light years away, so a little closer. 40% larger than Earth. That one surrounds a red dwarf planet, so smaller than the sun, but still can have inhabitable planets. 267-day orbit, though. So these ones are kind of similar to our orbit, which I don't know how necessarily that relates, or how why that's necessary, but it just feels like all these things are calculated to try to detect the most perfect conditions, or at least the most liked to Earth. And I got a couple more. Literally, both of them are from Kepler. Like I said, the Kepler mission felt like the biggest like launch into trying to find planets. The Kepler 442b was it's 1194 light years away, 33% larger than Earth. Pretty short orbit with 112 days. Um, but it's sufficient. This one they I guess they it's sufficient star radiation to support photosynthesis. So I guess it's just close enough to the sun to where that radiation, kind of like UVs and sunlight from on our Earth, can not only can it bring in just not like some sort of life form, but specifically like like fauna or like nature in that way, which kind of that supports life. That's part of the things that create oxygen is the plants that we have around us. And then the last one I had seen on like a couple of these like lists that I had seen on these websites was Kepler 1649c. Originally, it was like misidentified. They kind of just thought it was just an exoplanet that wasn't Earth-like, 300 light years away. But then they like reanalyzed it and saw that it was Earth-like, and it's 1.06 times the size, so just a little bit bigger, and it has 75% the light Earth has. So it's missing a little bit of the light. It's not as bright, and that can maybe cause for a little less of radiation and UV which maybe keeps from nature growing. But it's kind of funny to think originally they just kind of cast it off as another exoplanet. in the archive of thousands they already have. But yeah, that's just I thought it was kind of cool to play to not play with, but discuss the idea of habitable exoplanets. There are plenty the universe is old and it's been around for millions of years, so it's not too crazy to think about the idea that there are obviously with the millions of stars and the trillions of stars that maybe some of these stars kind of like our own sun have certain planets, like a planetary system that orbits it. And maybe some of these planets are actually habitable or we think about the possibility of inhabiting these planets, but maybe they're already inhabited. I'd like to kind of think that some of these planets that we kind of discover, these Earth-like planets, maybe already have life forms on them. We just haven't been able to go see the surface yet. But I would suggest everybody go and just go look this stuff up and have a little fun searching about space, learning about exoplanets, because it's a cool thing to think about space, and it's a cool thing to think about maybe the existence of life millions of years from now. Feeling self conscious is all a part of the general unease people feel about themselves. There might be some awkwardness that a person has that makes them feel a little ashamed of who they are. We can sometimes feel a little unwanted, incapable, or just unsure of what we are. And that can lead to a little bit of a feeling of embarrassment, embarrassed of who we are as people. When we're embarrassed, it can be kind of hard and it can keep you from feeling that relief, that kind of ease in who you can be or what you do in this world. And it just keeps you from doing things and keeps you from seeing these things. And maybe even affects you in giving you a predetermined idea of how something might respond to you or you responding to something else. You might just not feel like you can do it. You're not feeling like I said, incapable, unwanted, just generally unsure. Sometimes embarrassment can separate from just a self feeling. One can act or think in a certain way that causes them to be an embarrassment. We don't know that we're embarrassed. Sometimes we don't feel the embarrassed feeling more so. Sometimes we embarrass others just by the way we are. But nonetheless, feeling of unease, shame, a general awkwardness are all factors into embarrassment. I think feeling embarrassed is a very natural thing in the world, as humans. We just it's this awkwardness a little bit. We kind of feel ashamed of what we are. There's certain aspects that we have this shame for. We don't feel like maybe we're liked by people or we're just not capable of handling certain situations. Even when you don't necessarily put yourself out there all the time through other uneases or whatever whims you have, sometimes you're just super unsure and you just don't know how things look. You don't know how things are going to respond because you just have a super unease about it. But definitely there's a self-consciousness. You're kind of questioning things about yourself. You're pointing out things that maybe other people don't even point out, especially when it comes to kind of that self-embarrassment. I think everybody has a little unease. I don't think that's a necessarily an unnormal thing to have. I know that I don't know every aspect of myself, and people don't come around and tell me about how great I am or about how capable I am. And I sometimes don't feel great about myself, and I don't feel capable. So you're going to feel a little bit of that unease. You're going to feel like it's a little awkward to even put yourself out there, to like be you or dive into a situation head first. You might have like a predetermined thing of failure or of you not being receptive or not being people not being receptive to you or a situation in that way, but you feel bad about yourself nonetheless, right? That's kind of the whole thing. You feel less than. And there is no outline to saying what capability is and what the perfect person is. Each person kind of has their own thing going on. But it's part of that it's part of human life to question these aspects of our life. Everybody wants to feel wanted, right? Everybody wants to feel capable. Everybody wants a little bit of confidence in their life. They don't want to be told that they're doing something wrong, or they don't want to be put into a situation and feel uneased about it. That's where that embarrassment comes, is that it's that over it's what am I trying to say, that repetitiveness of down being down on yourself. You start to think that maybe it doesn't always start off as embarrassment too. Maybe you fail once or twice, or people don't want to be your friend or something like that, or you kind of question how you look. And at first, it's just a normal thing where everybody, I think, has that inner voice a little bit, but then it starts keeping you from going out and being who you are, and doing things, and feeding into aspects of life, not just your personal life, but life in general. It can be awkward being us. It can be awkward just being in our own skin, undoubtedly. It's paralyzing. It really is sometimes. A lot of time it's this paralyzing fear of judgment, that even before something even happens, there's something that's going to be thrown at you, right? That's always looking around the corner expecting something. And I think you're letting yourself down a lot, and it's a harsh thing to say, but you're kind of letting yourself down when you're already thinking about being embarrassed about something. You're letting yourself you're keeping yourself from, being known, and being your true self, or you don't know if you can handle a certain situation, if you can do a certain job, or do a certain task unless you do it. And like it's that judgment, whether it's self-judgment or judgment by others. I think even sometimes we might want to think that we're capable, or we think we're a little bit more, and when that feeling isn't reciprocated, or that it's not just it doesn't feel equated in any way, then you start to question. It feels that the questions start to just flood in at that point. But sometimes it spawns from a specific moment. Sometimes someone like embarrasses you, or you do something kind of embarrassing that you thought was kind of cool, or you've done a certain amount of tasks that are kind of similar to this one thing, and all of a sudden it doesn't turn out right, and you were like, whoa, that's not how it was supposed to be. I thought it was way more capable. I think even just a general, when things are kind of thrown at your life, and there's a kind of a little bit of this chaos, and things are shifting back and forth, like I said, it brings that unease. I think things can spawn from that moment then, right? Unknown of the outcome then leads to those embarrassing ideals, ideologies. Sorry, I was trying to think of the word. But you see how others handle it too, right? Some people are so confident, and they feel like they're so capable that that can be kind of embarrassing. You're kind of embarrassed that you can't do that. When you even if you think that you're alike to some people, that when they do things, you're like, why can't I just do that? Why am I such an embarrassment? Why do I feel so weird dressing how I want to dress? Why do I feel so weird working at this job? Why do I feel so weird doing these things? I don't, and other people just are doing their thing. They might have those same feelings fighting them inside, but it's kind of a better way of navigating. And I know sometimes we can very much so pinpoint those certain aspects of our life that we're most embarrassed about. It's not necessarily like it's across the whole spectrum of embarrassment, but certain things you feel awkward about, or ashamed about, you feel uneasy about. I know for me, a lot of times I feel embarrassed about kind of the way I interact with people. I'm not good with conversations sometimes. I like to talk and I like to say things, but I kind of just talk freely, and I can be a very blunt and black and white person. So I get self conscious when I get around people about talking to them. And then that even sometimes leads into me thinking like, I don't even want to be seen. I'm an embarrassment to be seen. But that's all self conscious. I really know that. And it leads to a lot of self regulation, I think, and not in a good way, where I'm keeping myself away from doing bad things. I'm just keeping myself away from everything. And I think that's kind of what happens with people, is when they start to feel super embarrassed, or they have that predisposed embarrassment already, you're kind of just regulating every little thing you do. You're like feeling like you're already, tiptoeing around. It keeps you just from loving yourself, living freely, doing things. it just keeps you from the nature of situations coming through. You just don't know how people are gonna respond to you or how you're gonna respond to people when you don't wanna be around them. When you have certain errands and certain tasks to do, when you're dreading the outcome or you don't want something bad to happen out of it and you're already kind of feeling this certain, like, shame in it, or you're feeling that, like, "Oh, there's some embarrassment. People if people know I'm doing this or if I'm not able to do it, then people are gonna know I'm not able." It just keeps you from the nature of situations. You can perpetuate more embarrassment, I think, sometimes by just always having that predetermined idea. And then inevitably anxiety is being caused, right? There's induced anxiety. You just all of a sudden are freaking out at every circumstance. At something, at least in my situation, it feels that's what it is. A lot of this judgment of myself, it feeds directly into my anxiety. I'm embarrassed of myself. I'm embarrassed of the things I do. Even in like when I do the podcast, literally, every time I jump on the podcast, I'm embarrassed for some reason. I just don't think I'm going to be heard or well received in some way. But embarrassment also sometimes goes outside of our own self-perception. Sometimes people don't understand what embarrassment is. They don't have that kind of awkward feeling or that shameful feeling in their head, but embarrassment can be lived through other people. People can often be acting a certain way or cause a certain situation or handle things a certain way that feels like an embarrassment in a way. That's even a hard thing to say is you shouldn't be paying attention too closely to people's lives where you're embarrassed by them because you have your own things to worry about. But some people just act a certain way and it kind of it kind of makes you feel like it's perpetuating an idea in another way where it's not perpetuating necessarily an idea about yourself, but because this person's acting out and they're embarrassing, that's how everybody like that person will act, or that this person will always be that way in every situation. I think there's an awareness sometimes to embarrassing moments, to whether you are an embarrassment or you feel embarrassment. It's a hard thing. It's always this really regretful, shameful, awkward feeling. I think it's the what really makes it feel so harsh is that awkwardness. It's a real unease. Nobody really wants to judge, other people and nobody wants to judge themselves, but inevitably it's kind of going to happen and you're going to feel a little bit of that shame whether you're judging yourself or a little of that shame when you're judging other people. We're not necessarily always going to know what people are going to do, right? We're not going to know how people live and people aren't going to feel the same way we feel. We may stop ourselves from doing something, but another person does it unwarranted, right? And that can be just a confidence issue. Maybe that they're doing it and it's truly an embarrassing thing and you were able to refrain yourself from that embarrassment, but they just can't. I don't think embarrassment necessarily is the worst thing in the world. Sometimes a little embarrassment can point things out to yourself. There's no avoiding it necessarily, right? There's no way of like avoiding it outrightly. You can maybe, if some embarrassing moment happens, you can kind of play it off as it didn't happen, or you kind of failed at something. You can play it off, but another thing is to think about just confronting it kind of head on. Something embarrassing happens, and you just gotta own up to it. You fall in front of a bunch of people. You get up and you say, I fell. That was me. That's embarrassing. I just made a goof of myself. You try to, put yourself out there and talk to people, but you're just not connecting to people. Nah, well, I just didn't agree with those people. I just didn't get along with them. So there's certain things with I think it's better to just almost kind of just from confrontation directly confront it head on. I think that sometimes is best. You almost kind of want to play into the embarrassment a little bit. Act as if only even if like even just like act as if nothing happens. I think even that in a way, right? Where you just kind of you can't avoid it because it happens. You don't want to be a denial person in that way of avoiding it. So you don't want to deny something embarrassing happened. But if you're someone that just kind of just like it happens and you just keep moving on, you know that sometimes embarrassing moments and these certain shameful responses we have to ourselves or to other people are just in the whim of the moment or just for a short period of time. It kind of feels like a lot of times that that's what it is. A lot of these embarrassments may not last a long time. And if we kind of confront these certain things that we feel shameful about it or that we feel judgmental on ourselves about, maybe that just kind of helps. You got to kind of think about embarrassment in like a past tense way, right? Where it happened, we're moving on, don't apologize for it, right? That's a big thing too. If someone calls you out for embarrassing others, then maybe there is something to then apologize for a mistake. But if you're just sitting there always apologizing for every little thing you feel ashamed about or every little thing that made you feel a little awkward or incapable of, then you're just going to be apologizing forever. It's another thing that's just going to hold you back a little bit in working through that embarrassment. Just make more. I think the big sentiment at the end of the day is have some freaking compassion for yourself, man. I find it so hard that I don't love myself. I am so hard on myself, and I know a lot of people can relate to that. We all judge ourselves and we feel uneasy about the things and qualities of our life, incapable, unwanted, unsure. I think that's a pretty normal thing. We feel embarrassed by the things we do, or we feel embarrassed by other people's lives, what they do and how they respond to situations. But you just got to realize that you're just kind of doing it, man. We're just kind of living life the best that we can. You got to understand that you're only responsible for your own feelings and you're only receptive based on how you feel about things. If you're just going to be shunned off and you're going to be embarrassed about everything and you're just going to always feel like you're not able to do anything, then that's going to hold you out. It's hard to overcome that hump, right? Of that embarrassment or just shame in any way, but we can. Show yourself a little compassion, keep it moving. Past tense when it comes to embarrassment, it happened in the past, right? Let's move forward and just look for the future. Alrighty, friends. That's really all I have to say about that. I appreciate y'all stopping by, listen to episode 30. If you want to listen to this episode or any of my episodes, I always post them on YouTube or Spotify under the Odd Thoughts podcast, pretty convenient. If you enjoyed it at all, any of my episodes, or you find anything I say relatable in any way, subscribing would be very much appreciated. I'm very grateful for any support I can get. Also, if you wanted to follow me on my social medias, I have a Facebook, Instagram, Twitter as well. I make sure to try to link those all in the video description, as well as also in my YouTube channel bio. So check both those places if you want to try to find that. But I'm just so thankful that I get to come up on the mic and speak to y'all, and I'm having so much fun with the podcast, truly. And I'm only working on trying to find out what more to do outside of podcasting. So, with all the support that I'm getting, I just appreciate it so much. But I love everybody. Thank you for stopping by. Make sure to show up for yourselves every single day and be excellent to each other.